ourselves, we are multilinguals as teachers of English or other dominant languages. We are ourselves bringing multiple and complex post-colonial identities into the classroom. How can we blindfold ourselves and our learners? These days, communication is becoming highly multimodal and multidimensional. Right? Because of technology, because of digital spaces, we are constantly looking at multiple language sources and synthesizing our understanding. The moment the teacher is very conscious of using other languages or integrating other languages that she knows exists in the classroom, but she blindfolds or invisibilizes them in the pedagogy. Meaning is most important in communication, but unfortunately in the classroom setting, we forget that we are there to facilitate meaning making. We also need to embrace that our learners are operating in situations where the audience is also multilingual, right? So if I ask my students to work on a social media campaign post, if that is the writing genre I'm focusing on,
Hola y bienvenidos otra vez a mi canal de YouTube Español Por Dentro. Estoy aquí con otra invitada muy especial desde la Universidad de English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. Estoy aquí con Dr. Monishita Hajra Pande. Muchas gracias, Dr. Monishita, por estar aquí.
Gracias.
Okay, so while Dr. Monishita is fluent in Spanish, but in the interest of a larger audience reach as well as the comfort that Monishita finds in English as well, we are going to have this interview in English, and we're going to talk about translanguaging, a concept that has fascinated me a lot and on which there is no better authority, I would say, than Dr. Monishita to talk about. Just to let my viewers know, so I met Dr. Monishita at the English and Foreign Languages University in Hyderabad, where I was doing a teacher training course in Spanish language. So Dr. Monishita is fluent in both English and Spanish, and she is someone with whom getting to know about language and translanguaging would be something fantastic. So, firstly, I would just like to introduce Dr. Monishita to all my audience. Dr. Monishita Hajra Pande is an academic in English language education with extensive experience in teaching, research, and teacher training. Before joining the English and Foreign Languages University in Hyderabad, she served as Assistant Director of the Critical Writing Program at Ashoka University's Young India Fellowship and taught at Ambedkar University, Delhi and IGNOU. She holds a PhD and MPhil from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, and a master's degree in English linguistics and Spanish as well. Her research focuses on teacher talk, cross-linguistic transfer, multilingualism, translingual practices, ESL literacy, equity, social justice, and linguistic empowerment, alongside work on government-led teacher training projects. With such a large body of work behind her, truly it's an honor to have you, Monishita. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Siddharth, for inviting me to your podcast. It's an amazing feeling to be able to connect with foreign language teachers and also English teachers on a platform that is common, because when we talk about language pedagogy, it cuts across languages. So that's the common ground we have found, and it's wonderful to be here.
The pleasure is mine totally, Monishita. So, firstly, Monishita, as I told in the intro as well, that we're going to talk about translanguaging. So, for the viewers who may not know or who are hearing this word for the first time, what exactly is translanguaging and how do you define it?
Okay, so translanguaging is a term that's become extremely popular in the last 2 decades, drawing from the work in the area of bilingualism and multilingualism. We are beginning to understand that in multilingual societies, naturally people use their full linguistic repertoire for any act of communication. It comes very organically and naturally to multilingual speakers to draw from across their language repertoires to make their point clear. Now, in informal settings, when people do code switching or code mixing, we don't really worry about it. However, the moment we look at a formal space like classroom, and when we are teachers of dominant languages like Spanish, English, French, etc., we tend to uh, believe that any kind of language mixing in the classroom, other than the target language, is a kind of a disservice that we are doing to our students, right? Because we believe that the mandate that we have as teachers is to maximize the use of the target language. Now, this idea of a monolingual classroom practice, which we continue to believe, does not really hold any scientific ground in today's time. In the 1960s and 70s, the language teaching methods like audiolingualism, structuralism, they promoted target language use. There was zero tolerance to any native language use in the classroom. But now we are beginning to understand that in multilingual classrooms or in a bilingual classroom where students already bring a lot of linguistic resources with them in their L1 or first language. If, as teachers, we believe or we behave like they are bringing nothing, since they don't know the target language, they are tabula rasa, they are blank slate. That's actually a lot of resources that the students are bringing. We are not able to maximize the use of those resources or integrate them in scientific ways to help them learn better. So, translanguaging can be looked at from different dimensions. One way to define translanguaging would be a functional way to do it, right? Like older definitions would define translanguaging as alternating between two languages to make meaning, right? That's a practical or functional view. Then comes definitions from Jason Senos and others working in the Basque region of Spain. A lot of their work is from there, where they look at the fluidity of language practices as translanguaging. So, for instance, when we talk about literacy, literacy practices cut across languages. So, when you have a bunch of literate learners who already actively read, write, speak, use another language, they are already bringing a host of literary practices. So, translanguaging acknowledges the fluidity of literacy practices across languages and to embrace it in pedagogy and policy in education. Then comes another dimension of translanguaging, which is from Garcia. She is one of the pioneers working in this field. So Garcia talks about Ophelia Garcia. Ophelia Garcia highlights, of course, the idea of using the full linguistic repertoire of a speaker or a user of a language. And it also is a kind of a political act. As teachers of English or Spanish, we are not native speakers, right? That native, non-native difference has been questioned, right? In 1970s, 80s, we believed that, okay, there is a native, non-native divide between language users. But now we have moved past those ideas of nativity. So when we are looking at languages as tools of communication and everybody has an equal share or right to it, then the hierarchy between native speaker and non-native speaker automatically gets disrupted. So as ourselves, we are multilinguals as teachers of English or other dominant languages. We are ourselves bringing multiple and complex post-colonial identities into the classroom. How can we blindfold ourselves and our learners to the complex socio-political and economic fabric in which these languages are being taught, learnt, and used? So when I, as a teacher, embrace translanguaging and legitimize it in the classroom, I'm also creating counter hegemonic practices and discourses, right? So that's Ophelia Garcia's I mean, some of her definitions repeatedly talk about the idea of, creating counter power dynamics in the classroom. Another aspect of translanguaging reminds us that these days communication is becoming highly multimodal and multidimensional. Right? Because of technology, because of digital spaces, we are constantly looking at multiple language sources and synthesizing our understanding or even communicating. Por ejemplo, en este podcast podemos utilizar dos lenguajes, ¿no? Es posible. Similarly, languages in the classroom when they are being taught, we need to cut across modes of communication. So it's no longer just the textbook. As teachers, we need to become more creative about the different sources through which we are giving input and the different sources in which our students can give output. So just expecting them to write answers, that is one way to express, or just to speak and express your feelings, that's another, just traditional ways. There are many, many other ways in which language can be given as input and output can be expected. So that's the multimodality aspect of translanguaging. That helps us to integrate multiple languages quite seamlessly. For instance, I can ask my students to watch a YouTube in Hindi and then, write something about it in English. So the input and output gets beautifully, balanced, and it also has certain cognitive benefits attached to it when we are looking at translanguaging. What are the cognitive benefits? The cognitive view highlights that translanguaging is not just about feeling comfortable in the classroom, that my mother tongue is being used, but it is also about using my thinking abilities, my cognitive abilities to the fullest. I'm bringing my complete cognitive self into the discussion and not letting the language barrier come in between communication. And I would like to end the segment on defining translanguaging with Kanak Raja's definition, where he highlights how translanguaging questions the fractional view of bilingualism. So, for the longest period of time, we believed that in the mind of a bilingual or multilingual, languages existed as separate entities. But he brings a layer to the definition, which talks about an integrated languaging system that's operating in the mind of bilinguals or multilinguals. We will touch upon some of these aspects as we go along, hopefully, in the conversation. But yeah, these are the different dimensions of the term.
Thank you very much, Monishita, for covering the different layers of the concept and the idea of translanguaging. So, in fact, as just for the benefit of my viewers, I'd like to state that a lot of the questions that we're going to cover in this podcast are based on a wonderful article written by Dr. Monishita titled "Translanguaging Pedagogy: A Tool for Social Justice and Equity in the Language Classroom." So, I will be sharing the link of this article in the description of the video so that you can go and access that as well and get to know more about this concept of translanguaging. Dr. Monishita, so my next question to you is about, in the article you describe monolingual norms as hegemonic practices. So in your experience, what are the most invisible ways, this hegemony operates in everyday classroom routines? If you can just uncover it for us.
Yeah, I mean, the moment the teacher is very conscious of using other languages or integrating other languages that she knows exists in the classroom, but she blindfolds or invisibilizes them in the pedagogy, that itself creates a hegemonic classroom culture, isn't it? Like when through my pedagogy, materials, expectations, I am constantly prioritizing the use of English in some way. I mean, I understand there is a pedagogic goal to it. I want my students to be able to express themselves in English, but when they are in a part of their interlanguage, because language development is a complex process, right? When as teachers we keep focusing on accuracy, that is correct grammatical usage in the classroom, right? As English teachers or as Spanish teachers, we believe that one of the main goal is that my students should speak good English, or they should speak grammatically correct Spanish. We consider that to be equivalent to how competent we are as teachers. Now, language development doesn't happen like that. It's not that structures and words and vocabulary and semantic notions, they don't get uh, absorbed and assimilated overnight. And it's not that, even if you look at first language acquisition, children, they make a lot of quote unquote errors before they can actually get to a language form. But we don't worry about it, we don't shame them, we don't blame them. If a baby is not able to say the word milk, in Hindi it would be doodh. It's a very complex word, milk. It has a word final cluster, or even in Hindi, the word ends with a cluster. It's a very complex word. The child does not utter that word the first time the child is attempting to express meaning. So, meaning is most important in communication. But unfortunately, in the classroom setting, we forget that we are there to facilitate meaning making. We are trying to co-create knowledge together through language. So automatically, when our focus is on accuracy and we want our students to use the target language grammatically correct forms, we create a kind of a hierarchy between languages, between knowledge systems, because they are bringing their ideas and thoughts in another language. The moment we create a kind of a competition between languages in the classroom, an unhealthy competition between identities of learners, automatically we are in a way supporting or promoting hegemonic practices. Because see, all these languages that we are teaching, they are hegemonic languages. They are the languages through which colonization happened. We cannot deny it. So we do need to learn them for different purposes, but with what attitude are we learning them? Are we learning these languages from an attitude that, oh, my identity or my languages are inferior, what I bring into the classroom is no longer useful? Or am I trying to revisit my uh, relationship with these dominant languages and giving it a new avatar, right? So when we insist our learners to only speak in the target language, when they are struggling to, when we keep correcting our learners for the correct grammar and vocabulary, we do not pay attention to the meaning that they are trying to express. When we create a very strict distinction between their home language or their mother tongue or other tongues and the target language, when we turn a blind eye to the fact that they are bringing a host of resources into the classroom through other languages, we are, in a way, invisibilizing their languages, their identities, their cultures. Automatically, the content of discussion in the classroom will also be native culture content that will take precedence over any local experiences that our students are going through. So if we are not able to situate learning in the context in which learning is happening, we are again, in a way, promoting hegemonic practices. And we do see a lot of uh, dissociation between the textbook that we bring to the classroom and the actual context in which our learners are operating, right? So this gap between their realities versus what the curricular materials are, this gap can be filled through translanguaging in some sense.
Okay. Interesting, Monishita. So, in fact, that brings me to the question. You know, the, part of it which you mentioned in your previous answer, that we as language trainers or teachers, we tend to evaluate our own credentials as a teacher by how much is the student grammatically speaks. So in fact many teachers do believe that English only, or let me also take it further to Spanish only, because we are also covering that language in a bit. Many of the teachers believe that English only or Spanish only idea, it that improves fluency. So what evidence or classroom realities have sort of convinced you that translanguaging can actually strengthen the language proficiency, be it English, Spanish, or any other language, rather than weaken it?
Okay. Now, when we are encouraging the use of translanguaging in the classroom, and if we want to make it seem very organic and very spontaneous, we also need to embrace that our learners are operating in situations where the audience is also multilingual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, if I ask my students to work on a social media campaign post, if that is the writing genre I'm focusing on,
Mm-hmm.
then their audience is also a multilingual audience. So, if I integrate the use of Hindi and English in that context, I'm not doing it because they don't know English. I mean, I want us to understand that translanguaging is not a crutch. It is not a helpless pedagogic strategy. Oh, my students don't know enough Spanish, so as well use some English. Or oh, my students don't know English, so let me help them with L1. It's not coming from a place of helplessness. It's not coming from a place of deficiency, that they don't know this, so I have to explain it to them in L1. That's generally the place from where we come whenever we do any kind of language mixing in the
Right.
classroom. In a Spanish classroom, the language mixing could be between English and Spanish also, isn't it? Am I right? For instance, when I used to teach Spanish and all my students knew English, I would fall back on English at times to kind of facilitate communication. So, uh, yeah, I mean, what were we talking about? Sorry, I lost the thread.
No, so yeah, we were talking about the fact that many teachers believe that English only or Spanish only improves fluency. So
Yeah, right.
what are the evidence or classroom realities that convinced you that
Right.
translanguaging can actually strengthen the
Support,
proficiency?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So now, suppose my students are A1, A2 learners,
Mhm.
or lower intermediate elementary learners in the target language,
Mhm.
and I keep insisting that they only use the target language, which may not be always possible because the task complexity might be much higher than their present level of proficiency in the target
Mhm.
language. So if
Mhm.
we keep insisting on target language use, come what may, what will happen? What are the possibilities? One is that they will be restricted in their communication, right? You might give them some structures
Mhm.
and ask them to only use those structures to talk or write. So we are, in a way, restricting their learning, right? Beyond those structures, they cannot think or write.
Mhm.
That's one problem. The second, in English classrooms, what we find is what happens is when students are put in that kind of a situation where we are not making space for cognition, we are not facilitating their brainstorming, mind mapping, thinking, we are not supporting thinking, we are only focusing on production in L2. The learner, out of frustration, will resort to copying, memorizing, rote learning, or even plagiarizing. And now we have AI. So, students will simply go to AI and get the answer. So, the product that you're looking at, grammatically correct writing sentences, you may get it. But how? How did the student reach there? As teachers, we need to invest in that process, in that journey, in that how. Okay. So, when we are able to integrate L1 in that process of, in the speech or writing, we are ensuring that their cognitive and metacognitive resources are actively engaged in learning. That will automatically have a positive effect on language development. But if I do not invest in the process and I simply insist on a L2 only product in terms of speech or writing, the students may still reach there, but they might be doing all kind of shortcuts or extremely restricted superficial engagement with the language learning process. That's where the difference lies.
Right. Very, very interesting, and I think very relevant to the modern times that we live in terms of the AI. So, during your the study on this topic, Monishita, you've also worked with adult professionals from the global south. So, tell us a little bit about your experiences with them. How did their professional, identities and maybe life experiences shape the way they engaged with translanguaging in writing?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I should highlight the fact that in today's podcast, we are primarily looking at translanguaging and
Mm-hmm.
writing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, translanguaging in speech
Mm-hmm.
is another area which
Yeah.
I have not really explored much, and a lot of studies are going on, but this is still a kind of an evolving field. So we are all trying to document and learn from,
Mm-hmm.
classroom practices. I would encourage the teachers joining us to think about these ideas critically, and I'm sure in your own classrooms you do use multiple language repertoires. How are you doing it? If you can think about them more critically and document those practices, they can really create interesting dialogues. So, coming to the study that you mentioned, so at EFLU, we run something called an international training program where working professionals, mostly diplomats, they, as part of India's exchange programs, they visit our university for a 1 month or sometimes a 6 week long English proficiency course. Now, all of them are established professionals in their field, right? And in my class, and this was a basic proficiency group. Usually, the participants, when they come, we give them a proficiency test and we try to understand their entry level proficiency in English. And this is a study that I did with the basic proficiency group, and it was so interesting to see how they brought in their cultural identities, their voices into the writing classroom, because they were allowed to switch between languages, work in similar or different language groups. So, for instance, when they had to do pre writing tasks where they are brainstorming, reading, thinking, mind mapping, I would either, in some classes, I would put them in same language group. Like all of them who speak French, they would come together because Spanish speaking countries and French speaking countries, they may not be from the same country, but they do share the same language. So, like that, we try to put together people from similar cultural or linguistic backgrounds.
Right.
And the discussions that happened in those groups, they were not just limited to using English, but bringing their full linguistic repertoire into that discussion. So the quality of conversations, the quality of discussions in the classroom went up. Initially, when I just used English, I realized that many of them felt frustrated. They felt extremely underconfident. Like imagine these are people who are doing excellent work in their fields, but one place which can make them feel insufficient and deficient is an English classroom. If it is transacted in that way, you know. So I'll just give you a very concrete example. So, in my first week, I show them a TED talk where we are talking about the power of writing because it's a writing module. And as part of that discussion, I take a quote from the TED talk which says, writing is a superpower. It has the power to change the world. So I take that quote from the TED talk, I put it down on the board, and I ask them to respond to it. Like, what do they think about it? And they can do it in language similar groups. These discussions was so empowering that our participants from African countries, they brought a completely different view on this idea that writing is a superpower. They said that writing is not always a superpower because majority of the languages in the world do not have a writing script. So when we are saying that literacy or writing is a superpower, we are in a way disempowering the majority of the language speakers of the world, right? From this, I had not thought like that. When I put down that quote, I thought they're going to talk about the advantages of writing, the benefits of writing, why writing is so important. But this perspective that majority of their African languages or their tribal languages, they get passed on from one generation to another through a very rich oral tradition. They do not have a writing tradition. And actually, truly speaking, there are very few languages in the world which have a writing system. Majority of the languages do not. There are some 6,000 odd languages in the world, we say, and majority of them do not have. Like India, for instance, boasts to have around 700 languages out of the 7,000, and majority of our languages do not have scripts. But we don't even consider those languages, which are the majority, without
Yeah.
script, as even part of this conversation. So, this is a concrete example how translanguaging has the power to create critical conversations which can empower your learners to establish a complex relationship between their identity as a Spanish learner or French learner or an English learner and their own post colonial selves. And these power hierarchies between languages very naturally get questioned, and this is of course an example of critical thinking which we are all trying to push in our classroom, isn't it? So when we bring translanguaging, automatically lateral thinking, creativity, critical thinking, all these find a very organic space um, uh, in the dialogic space of the classroom. So yeah, I mean there are many examples that I can give, but I hope this one kind of makes it.
Yes.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, yes. It's a fantastic example that you've given, and how an actual classroom it sort of impacts when there are people from different linguistic backgrounds. So, Monishita, if we move along and talk about translanguaging tools in the writing module. So, what were the most effective translanguaging tools that you used in the writing module? Or you use rather, and why do you think that they work particularly well for, let's say, basic level learners?
Okay. So one tool, I mean, the one that I just shared, this is also a translanguaging strategy.
Right.
It's called double entry journal. Double entry journal is when you take a quote or an important line from a text. The text could be in target language. Here, my text was an oral text. It was not a written text. So they watched the TED Talk. I picked the key idea of the TED Talk and gave it to them. Through a brainstorming, they came up with their reaction to that quote and they wrote a small paragraph on it. So, this is a double entry journal in the sense, in one half of the journal, you have a kind of a quotation from the target language text and you respond to it in your mother tongue, or you can do it in both mother tongue and English. So in translanguaging, we encourage the mixing of languages, whether it be in speaking or writing as well. You will be surprised to see that when you give that kind of freedom to your learners, they are not going to do any random mixing of languages. They won't do that. First of all, they will be resistant to mixed languages. When you say that you're writing a paragraph, okay, you may not know all the words in Spanish, why don't you use some English words? They will be resistant. But if you give them a natural context, you say that okay, this is a paragraph you're writing for a bilingual audience, your audience knows English as well. If you give them a real life setting where the audience requires some sort of a multilingual expression, your students might start exploring this. When they explore, this is called code meshing, where you are mixing linguistic scripts together. Language scripts come together in the same writing. So when you actually engage them in systematic code meshing, you will be surprised to see when and where your learners are code meshing. You know, they are going to make strategic decisions where they're code meshing. They might begin their essay uh, with a saying from their mother tongue, and they will integrate that proverb or that idea into their writing. So you see, the moment we are asking them to explore the idea of code meshing, the entire thought landscape has expanded, isn't it? It's now legitimate for me to bring, say, a childhood memory into my personal essay. Exactly how it used to be in the childhood, exactly how my mother said it or my father said it. I have the freedom to bring it into my writing and use it for certain communicative purposes. So, when we are encouraging code meshing or code mixing, we are not doing it. I mean, your students will not do it randomly. You will see that there are some strategic decisions they are taking when they are actually using the two languages together for a particular purpose. So, this double entry journal is one strategy that I use. The other one was writing from a different perspective. This also gave me very good results. So, this was about email writing. The genre that I was focusing was personal emails. And the uh, text, the mentor text that they read was about a student who has gone to Spain to learn Spanish, and this person is from English. So generally, the texts that we choose are from international English textbooks, so that because the audience is kind of global, so they can relate. So they read this email that a person who is away from his family has written to his uncle and aunt. Okay, and the same person is writing a similar email to a friend about their experience of learning Spanish in Spain. And another email where the person is writing to his sister. So, what are we doing here? The context is the same. I'm away from my country, learning a new language, but I'm writing an email about the same experience to three different audience. One is my uncle and aunt, other is my friend, and the third is my family member, my sister, my sibling. So, what are we doing through this activity? We are trying to enter into discussions where we are highlighting that even if you're talking about the same thing, how you are saying it depends on the rhetorical situation. I might be talking about my experience, the same set of experiences that I'm having in Spain, but how I say it to my sister versus my friend versus my uncle and aunt will change. So through this activity, I asked them to reflect on their own linguistic choices that they make when they write an email to their boss in their languages, when they write the same set of things about the same set of things to a colleague. So basically, through this strategy, we are raising their rhetorical awareness about writing, and we are developing a kind of a style, writing style. Discussion on writing styles can happen beautifully when you are bringing translanguaging strategies into the classroom, because your students already write emails on an everyday basis. They communicate with their boss, they communicate with their colleagues, they write to their friends. They're already doing all that. When you are actively tapping into their L1 writing experiences and having discussions on these kind of rhetorical choices that we make as writers, it is extremely empowering, and what they actually write in English will also become a lot more refined. They are no longer just worried about the structure and vocabulary, they are also taking interest in their writing style, why they are saying what they are saying. Right, so across languages, these kind of conversations on rhetorical awareness automatically helps to transfer some of those strategies into the writing of the target language. Okay, I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
A lot of our teachers have to teach newspaper reports as
Mhm.
part of their curriculum.
Right.
Now, instead of coming to the class with a newspaper report in English, which is what we do most of the time, it might be helpful for you to ask your students to bring their favorite newspaper item from their mother tongue. Okay, something that they have read recently in Telugu, Hindi, whatever. And once they bring that newspaper article into the class or newspaper report into the class, you can have a very active discussion on newspaper writing as a genre that cuts across languages. Whether I write an article in Spanish, French, German, or Hindi, the the genre conventions are similar, same, isn't it?
Right.
Whether you write an advertisement in French or Spanish, the structure of an ad will not change. So when you are integrating discussions on these kind of genre conventions, writing strategies, or even reading strategies, these things can cut across LSRW. You are able to tap into something that we call the common underlying proficiency. Okay, this comes from a very interesting mod theory, which we called the dual iceberg hypothesis, proposed by Jim Cummins. The dual iceberg hypothesis shows us that L1 and L2, when we put them together, when we look at them as one system, right? L1 and L2, they might be having very different surface features. But at the deep structure, there is something called common underlying proficiency that is common to both or any language. So when we are able to strategically tap into that CUP, common underlying proficiency, in our classroom through our tasks and pedagogic choices, we are able to maximize learner engagement, learner cognition. We're able to develop metalinguistic awareness, and the rewards are multiple in the teaching learning process. So to kind of summarize the three strategies that I actively used, one was double entry journal, where the input text was in English, the output could be in English or their mother tongue. The brainstorming also happened in language similar groups, which brought their full selves into the task. The second one was writing from a different perspective, where it was the same email that they were writing to different audience, and they were actively reflecting on how they would make their language choices when they are changing the audience. The third was using a mentor text. Using a mentor text, similar to what I said, when you're teaching a particular writing genre, don't insist on showing them the model text as a Spanish text or an English text. You can always ask your learners to bring a text that they have explored, and from there you can start the conversation. Automatically, as a teacher, you will see that part of the classroom where you had to give a lot of lecture on what is newspaper report, what is done, you will take a back seat and your students will take over, because they know what a newspaper report is. We are just replicating information in the classroom that our students already know, but we
Right.
believe that they don't know because we don't acknowledge the languages that they're bringing in their classroom.
Yeah. Very fascinating, very interesting, Monishita. Thank you so much for sharing these real life, I think, examples from the classroom, and I would really urge you to, if something more comes to your mind as we go along with the rest of the questions, please do share, because I think these real life examples or actual classroom practices which the students engage in is what makes the whole concept of translanguaging very interesting, instead of a lot of theoretical framework that we sometimes have to harp upon. Um, uh, Moving on to the next question, Monishita. So translanguaging is sometimes accepted in speaking but discouraged in writing. How can teachers justify translanguaging in writing classrooms without compromising academic expectations?
Yeah, this is a very, very difficult uh, thing to address. Um, yeah, I mean, for all practical purposes, for examinations, we expect our students to write only in the target language, which I understand. But at the same time, if we give them tasks that demand them to read multiple resources across modes and languages, that can at least ensure that their process is extremely enriching and rewarding. If we encourage them to write even in their final text, even if they have to write in Roman script, they can bring loan words, or they can bring words from their mother tongue that are essential for that particular essay. For example, if I ask my students to write a personal essay, their experience of learning Spanish or their experience of learning languages
Mhm.
through their childhood, etc. This is a personal narrative. In that personal narrative, if they do not bring languages from, I mean, experiences from other languages, then they will be writing something that is not genuine. So if we can show them how different languages come together in a single text for the purpose of communication, for to ensure that meaning making is better through that strategy, I'm sure we will be able to even integrate it in formal spaces. Yeah, the problem is where the scripts are different, right? Like, suppose I'm writing a Roman script and then I switch to Devanagari. That I think don't have tolerance for that kind of mixing in writing yet, for sure. But in at least, if you know the script that that your student is using, and if you think that for a particular assignment that is under your control, like you are going to evaluate, and you can see that the student is doing it for a particular purpose, I mean, if we don't penalize them for that, or we kind of reward them for bringing that creativity into writing. This is also extremely creative, right? How you bring two scripts together. Like I said, they won't do it randomly. They are going to make certain strategic decisions about why they are doing it. So as far as bringing words, expressions from other languages into the writing of L2 or L3, uh, through the Roman script when it's English or Spanish, I
Mhm.
think that can be done. I mean, even in test situations, if you expect them, for example, you ask them to write a recipe, you're teaching them imperativo. And for imperativo, you ask them to pick a local recipe that is dying, okay, a dying recipe that you can't find on YouTube, okay, but something that's part of your family tradition, right? They're bringing that recipe. Automatically, they're going to use words that are not available in Spanish, right? So, but they are going to Romanize it. So, I think this up till this, I think we can reach. But yeah, if you ask them to do a kind of a mixing of scripts, you might have to convince your administration or your school or your institute for something like that in, like I said, in creative spaces. Suppose you are planning to have a kind of an exhibition of student writing, and it's for a multilingual audience. You bring the parents there, you bring different members of the community there, and then you kind of exhibit some writing samples which also use other scripts, but that can be only restricted to very specific situations. um, but like I said, it's not just you as a teacher who will feel uncomfortable. Even students require a lot of training, and discussion and awareness raising to embrace this kind of a pedagogy. Initially, your students will not feel comfortable that you're encouraging them to actively bring their L1. But over a period of time, when they also start enjoying your lessons, when they start feeling included, when they start connecting with their voice, what they want to say. So, translanguaging pedagogy is something that is a learner centered pedagogy. So, nowadays we are talking about learner centeredness, right? So, translanguaging gives the power to the learners. I think I'll stop there for you to take that idea forward if you want.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Monishita, for explaining that. And so my question now is about the fact that you highlight that teachers don't need to know all languages in the classroom. So, what specific strategies help you give up the authority as the knower, so as to say, while still maintaining structure and learning outcomes?
Yeah. So there are a few myths about translanguaging
Mhm.
that, I mean, I also had those myths before
Mhm.
I deep dived into this field. The first myth is that I need to know all the languages, only then I can translanguage in the classroom. Second myth is that translanguaging works only for learners with lower proficiency levels. That's not true. Even if you have students who have intermediate or advanced proficiency in the target language, you can still bring translanguaging pedagogy to initiate and sustain critical conversations and dialogues. Third myth about translanguaging is that translanguaging is a kind of a helpless strategy only for scaffolding. Translanguaging is only for scaffolding. When my students don't understand a word, I give them the equivalent in L1. So it's only for explanation and word meanings and nothing beyond it. But that's not true. I'm sure by now people have understood the scope and power of translanguaging. It cuts beyond just scaffolding. So, what stops us from adopting translanguaging pedagogy? One of the reason, of course, other than our own biases and prejudices that we have of, that mixing languages will confuse our students, that, if they are not using correct grammar, then I'm failing as a teacher. Other than those kind of perceptions, one major reason why we get scared of translanguaging in the classroom is because we know that we don't know all the languages. And what the students can say or do, we will not be able to control that. Which means that as a teacher, somewhere I have to be ready for unexpected classroom interaction and discourse. A lot of times when we pose a question as a teacher, we have certain expected answers in our head. And how to deal with answers that are beyond my imagination is something that can really drive me into a mode of anxiety. So when I am embracing translanguaging pedagogy, I have to somewhere accept the fact that, like, my students are coming halfway to learn English, I will also go halfway to understand what they're saying in whichever language they choose to do. I will also learn their cultural experiences, learn about their languages. So it's a halfway street. Like, both parties have to come together, and this leads to excellent opportunities for negotiation of meaning. So there is a lot of research in SLA, second language acquisition, which tells us that a very positive indicator of language development is language negotiation. So negotiation work, like, I'm trying to say something, you are trying to understand something, you are asking me some question, I'm trying to try my best to explain to you. This work that we are doing, this intellectual labor that we are putting, this has a positive effect on language development. And when you are embracing these languages in the classroom for meaning making, it's a best way to create negotiation work. They know that you don't know. For example, I don't know Telugu. Now, if my student is trying to explain something to me in Telugu, imagine the amount of intellectual negotiation he or she has to do to ensure that it reaches me. The same thing, by the way, happens with my international participants. Of course, I know Spanish. So with my Spanish participants, I switch. We keep switching between English and Spanish. Even in class. In class, if I have 5 to 6 people who know Spanish, when I'm giving them feedback or when I'm listening to their ideas, I constantly switch between the two languages. But I don't have that luxury for my students who speak French or who speak Swahili, right? I don't have that luxury. So what do I do there? I set up a peer conversation where one person is expressing the idea, the other one is trying to help them be a language broker, helping that student to communicate it to the teacher. So it's like, suppose you are speaking in Spanish, I don't know Spanish. You're trying your best to help me understand it in English, and there is a language broker in between who knows both the languages, and that person kind of gives inputs to help. Believe me, it leads to a lot of interesting conversations in the classroom. So students will help each other to ensure that communication happens. There will be no breakdown of communication. We don't have to worry, oh, I don't know Telugu. So if my students are using Telugu, how will I know what they're saying or how they're saying? They might be talking about something else. They might not be doing the task. But these are all anxieties and worries that we have as teachers because we want to control the classroom discourse. We are not ready to let go of the classroom discourse and make our learners an equal negotiator in the classroom interaction. So, and when you have tasks and you have set task outcomes, you want your students to reach the task outcome. So, you will anyways be able to see whether they have reached the task outcome. So there is no point in getting worried that I don't know their language, so what they're speaking in the group or what they are discussing, it's all going out of control. I don't know what's happening in my own class, you know. So this kind of an anxiety that we often have is coming from our tendency to control the patterns of classroom interaction.
Interesting, very interesting, Monishita. And you discuss writing as more than just accuracy. It like in terms of voice, creativity, rhetorical awareness also matters. So, how does translanguaging help learners develop a strong writer's voice? In English or Spanish, or for that matter, any other language.
See, the idea of voice comes from your originality, what your thoughts, right, that you're bringing into the writing. And the best way in which you can bring your experiences, your thoughts, the connections that you're making, that can happen best when I am letting you legitimately think and express in all the languages that you are thinking and expressing in, right? So the first draft, for example, can be in any language that they want. They can write the first draft in their mother tongue and English together. You can give them some support structures, which we already do, right? We give them some support vocabulary and structure. So the first draft can, even before the first draft, the students should be put through a, a pre-writing stage where a lot of idea generation, a lot of reading or listening in other languages can happen. Suppose they have to write an essay or they have to write a report on something. In the pre-writing stage, you can ask them to watch something or read something in another language. That's totally fine. I mean, these days in the country, we are talking about IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems. So, if we want to integrate IKS into our mainstream education, I think it is about opening up our classrooms and becoming comfortable with multiple languages being the source of knowledge creation, isn't it? Like there are certain texts that are only available in Indian languages, they have not been translated in English. If I want to bring that knowledge into the classroom, I'll have to rupture that monolingual kind of practices or norms that are dominant in our higher educational context. So, uh, so going back to voice and choice, when we are encouraging our learners to bring their voice into their writing, we have to ensure that we are able to create a set of tasks that tap into creativity, critical thinking, lateral thinking, and divergent thinking. Right? Divergent thinking is basically creative thinking, and there's a lot of research evidence that shows that bilinguals and multilinguals are more divergent thinkers than monolinguals. Okay, so if I say a word to you in English, you will not only think about your experiences you've had in English, you'll think about your mother tongue, you'll think about Spanish. So, 4 5 different world views that you're carrying that comes into that thinking activity. So, if we are able to bring uh, activities before they start writing that taps into all these cognitive processes, automatically the content of their writing draft will be of a different quality. They will not just mimic what you have given them. They will not just try to replace words with something and give you a very structured limited output. You will see that the learner is bringing their own ideas into the text if the pre-writing stage is very rich in activities that cut across language boundaries. And I think this is something that's quite doable in language classrooms, right? I'm not saying that you ask them to submit the assignment in Hindi or in English. Okay, yeah, they are going to give you something in Spanish, which is what you want. But at least the processes that precede that product, that
Yeah.
final draft, let that be, multifaceted. Let that be multidimensional in terms of bringing their complete ideas and selves into the writing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Fascinating. And yeah, we've come almost towards the end of this wonderful chat with Monishita. So, Monishita, the last question for you is looking ahead now. So, what kind of institutional changes, be it in terms of curriculum, assessment, or teacher training, are most necessary, according to you, if translanguaging pedagogy is to become a real classroom practice than, just a theoretical idea?
Yeah. So one is, I must admit that this field is still developing. Hopefully, in our active academic lifetime, we will be able to see some teacher training frameworks or assessment frameworks, or rubrics or taxonomies, which can be integrated into teacher training programs, which can inform our curricular decision making policy. See, in policy, we already have a lot of globally policy frameworks are now embracing multilingualism, and even NEP 2020 has lots and lots of indication to to motivate us to look at translanguaging pedagogy as something that we can adapt and adopt in our classroom.
Right.
So, at the policy level, I don't think there is a problem. We do have a very strong kind of a voice these days where we are looking at linguistic human rights framework in policy, where we are saying that as an English teacher, I cannot say that it's none of my business what is your home language. I cannot say that, right? NEP 2020 makes it mandatory that since right to education is a constitutional right, it is the state's responsibility to ensure that the student is not kept out of education because of lack of educational opportunity in the home language. So it's a big thing. So from a language rights perspective, policy frameworks have realigned themselves, and that in a way is a good news for people operating in multilingual context, because we do have a policy push to look at work happening in multilingualism and trying to find ways to integrate it. So at the policy level, I don't see too many challenges to at least start our work in this direction. Now, coming to individual classroom practices, that's where the problem lies, and institutional cultures. These are the two levels where the struggle is. Now, institutional cultures um, uh, often are heavily monolingual, creating these language hierarchies, and so there, I don't know, it could be some sort of awareness raising that can help. It can also help individual teacher communities that can initiate dialogues within an institutional ecosystem or culture. And classroom practices, like you said, can be touched upon through teacher training programs. But unfortunately, we do not have a teacher training model for multilingual education yet. So yeah, I mean, right now, I think the best that we can do is encourage teachers to take up little participatory research projects, like action research projects in their individual micro contexts, and see what they are doing, why they are doing, how are they doing it, and begin by making some changes in teacher perception and teacher beliefs about translanguaging. That's the work I think we need to do right now, because a lot is happening in the classroom, but we don't know exactly what's happening. So, if teacher led participatory action research projects can be encouraged at the institutional level, that can inform institutional practices and cultures. And like I said, there is enough indication in the larger policy framework to do such a work. It's not something that we are discussing in vacuum, right? It is coming from times that we are living where there are
Mhm.
these shifts happening at the policy level.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that hopefully this this video probably reaches out to as many people and institutions as possible, so that the powers that maybe could also look into it a little bit more. And when you talk about even at the level of the teachers at their own individual level, if there are those who are listening or watching this video, can leave in the comment section what practices they are applying in their classrooms in terms of translanguage pedagogy. I think will give us more of an idea as to what exactly is happening. And that is the whole effort of this channel, to invite people to talk about different aspects of language and in literature as well. So I guess it's been a fascinating chat with Monishita. Thank you so much for your time, for your valuable time, and for engaging us with the idea of translanguaging in such a practical and interesting way. So really, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for taking interest in something like this, because it is very easy to just follow what's working and what's the norm. It takes a lot of courage and effort to, to venture into areas that are messy, that are disruptive, that can kind of challenge or question dominant beliefs and norms. So, you're doing a wonderful work to connect teachers and make them think about alternate pedagogies. So I wish you all the best. And once again, thank you so much for giving me this platform to come and share my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Dr. Monishita, por estar aquí, y espero que os haya gustado esta charla. Hasta el otro capítulo de Español por Dentro. Chao.
Ciao.